Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra deck tech. You know the drill. Before we dive into the latest deck tech, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't subscribed yet, and let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the deck. So the last week I have tested and practiced quite a bunch with Karma Ezreal and did really well with it on ladder, climbed to the top 25 master, and I want to share the list that my buddy Sasha, aka Kwabachi, who is even in the top 5 with the same list, have come up with, and where we are on the list and so on, and explain all the ins and outs and the things that I learned about the archetype. And yeah, I am really confident in our list, and everyone else that I know that has played the list so far has really liked it, be it Kwabachi, be it my buddy Patrick Dickman, who only played a handful of games with it so far, but really liked the look and the feel of it in the game so far and so on. So yeah, I think the list is pretty close to optimal right now, and the deck is really strong, probably the best deck on ladder right now. But it is kind of tedious to play, and it is pretty complex and challenging to play. So it's not the kind of deck you just pick up, jam, and crush with. Had to learn that the hard way. Threw away a bunch of games where I missed lines because there were so many options, and it's easy to like miss a winning line if you're not like in the right mindset and take a step back. Anyway, let's talk about the deck list. So first off, I want to talk about like the kind of obvious cards you find in every list and that are like non-debatable. So that is 3 Thermo Beam. Not much to say here. This is just a very flexible removal. It has its inflexibilities in the fact that it's slow and eats up all your mana, but it's flexible in the sense that it can kill a lot of things, can cost whatever you need it to cost in a way, and also can even be played for 0 for like an Ezreal trigger or progressing Ezreal level up. It's just a mainstay, and you won't see any reasonable list with less than 3. Next we have Rummage, another card that you usually these days will see at least 2 in every Ezreal list. I don't think I've seen one with less than 2. I've seen people with 3. Feel like 3 is a bit much. I think 2 is the sweet spot, especially when you also have Karma and Meditation and so on. You don't need too many Rummages, and without like Chump Wump, Mushroom Clouds, Rummage is still card disadvantage other than later in the game if you play it with Karma. So 2 is a good number to use your Mushroom Clouds and just have the value later with Karma. You have enough other sources for card draw. It's also nice to have a cheap burst spell for Ezreal kills and also just to keep your Eye of the Dragons going. Next, let's talk about Eye of the Dragon. I think this is arguably the best or one of the best cards in the deck. I think that the deck without this card would not be a good deck right now. This card wins so many of the more challenging matchups, be it Ashe, be it Noxus, anything that is heavier units, more proactive. Eye of the Dragon is an absolute star. And even in the matchups that I didn't mention, it's still a great card because it's like free pressure, it's free defense, it's free everything, and just for like effectively 1 mana and 1 card, and would fairly robust 1/3 stats, making it not die to Mystic Shots and stuff like that. There are very few lists that actually play 0. All I can tell you is don't touch those lists. It's horrible. Eye of the Dragon is an insane card, and if you played or watched a bunch of games of people play this deck with Eye of the Dragon, you quickly see why. So many games are just dominated by Eye of the Dragon that would otherwise be a nightmare or unwinnable. So yeah, Eye of the Dragon, insane. Mystic Shot, next card, every deck has 3 of those, no exceptions. It goes phase, it's fast, it kills small stuff. It's not the most impactful card, but it's pretty versatile in that it's cheap and can do a lot of things, even though it's very limited at what it actually kills, but it also finishes off bigger stuff. Then obviously 3 Ezreal. You also won't find an Ezreal Karma deck with less than 3 Ezreal. It's your win condition in some matchups where they have limited answers, especially against more aggressive decks. It's also pretty great early play to start pressuring them and getting free Mystic Shots to control the board, like against Scouts or say Noxus. Against Ashe, I like it a little less because their stuff is a bit bigger and it seems less necessary because they're also a bit slower. And they have 3 Culling Strike, and they are also better at grinding, so you can't let the game go infinitely long, while against some of the aggro decks you can kind of grind them out sometimes. So it's less risky to potentially lose your Ezreal to their single combat or their Fervor, but it's much bigger of a deal to lose it to the Culling Strike of the Ashe decks. Then Shadow Assassin. There are very, very few lists that have no Shadow Assassin, especially for ladder. There was the tournament list of Swim that skipped it because it was built to specifically fight aggro, and against aggro, Shadow Assassin is underwhelming, but it's never bad. It's a 3-cost 2/2 that blocks attacks and replaces itself. It can only be so bad, but in a like more well-rounded build for ladder, 3 Shadow Assassin is an absolute must in my opinion, and almost every list has 3. It's also nice for like random offense against slower decks, or even against more aggressive decks. Sometimes you get a bit of damage in. It lets you block their small like 1 attack units for free and so on. Just does a bunch of solid stuff for being free. It's still a very strong card. Next we have Concussive Palm. That's also basically a 3-off in almost every list by now. Some have, very, very few have 2, but I think almost everyone has 3. The card's just really good in a world where there are a lot of fatties, especially against Ashe and Noxus. Concussive Palm is really good, and overall it has just proven to be a really nice card. It helps level your Ezreal, it creates additional board presence. Being a spell and also producing a unit at the same time is perfect, because you want some units to defend against open attacks, but you want as few actual units as possible because of all your spell synergies. And Concussive Palm does that pretty well. There are also like fringe lines where you can like Will of Ionia, your own Concussive Palm, Tail of the Dragon, to replay it. I have done that very few times, but it came up. Next we have To Deny. Also absolute must basically. I haven't seen a list yet that didn't have To Deny. Also haven't seen one with 3 or 1 or 0. So To Deny is kind of the go-to. You need it to defend against some of the big spells. Ruination, Vengeance, random spells and critical choke points. Harrowing obviously. There are just a bunch of good things. Culling Strike, like removal on your Ezreal or your Karma, basically. Yeah, card is not as good as it used to be, so at 4, 2 is a pretty good number, and has just proven, yeah, necessary. Next we have Static Shock. Most people still played 3, some play 2, and we were on 2 for quite a while, but ultimately I like the 3rd Static Shock better than the 3rd Deep Meditation. went back to 3 shock. It's just on average a bit more flexible in the sense that it always costs 4 rather than sometimes 3 and a lot of the time 5. It also has board impact, which meditation doesn't have, and lets you actually like dig deeper into your deck, cycle through your deck, which is yeah, just really nice and makes it easier to level your Ezreal, which is pretty important. Then we have 3 Will of Ionia. Also, no way you're leaving the house without 3 Will of Ionia in these decks, like basically ever, and even less so in a world with Dariuses and stuff like that. So yeah, not much explanation needed really. Then we have 3 Karma, also pretty much a must. Swim ran 2 Karma, 1 Vi in his tournament setup, because Karma is obviously not that great if you mostly plan on playing the deck against aggressive decks, in terms of how you ban and what you let them have. And then Vi is better, but on ladder where you play a lot more mirrors and control decks and a wider range of decks, because you can't like ban stuff, Karma is much more necessary. The second Karma is also great usually, because then on 10 you can go Karma, draw 4 random spells, which is great. And yeah, just Karma is still very necessary for like the late game plan of the deck basically. And also I didn't really feel like she's actively bad against aggressive decks even on ladder, and didn't feel like I actively need something like a Vi to help against decks like Noxus. I've been doing fine against them with some tight play and good mulliganing basically. So yeah, 3 Karma, still the go-to really. And I guess the one thing that I can also touch on as more or less a stock card is Chump Wump. There are some people that run 0, like I've seen people run like Dragon's Claw over Chump Wump in a few lists, but most lists have at least 2 Chump Wump. I think Chump Wump is still pretty necessary. It fuels Get Excited if you run them, it fuels Rummage, it fuels Eye of the Dragon. It's nice for like Ezreal kills later. It can sometimes be a plan with Karma just to like Mushroom Cloud them. I once put 75 mushrooms in the opponent's deck with Mushroom Clouds and Karma. That can sometimes also be a route to get there. It also can make Deep Meditation cheaper, easier if you run them. So all in all, I've been pretty happy with the Mushroom Clouds, and they were kind of the unsung hero of the deck a fair share of the time. And a 4/3 is still like a very solid body. Means it blocks all the like 2/3s that you see around, which is quite a bunch. War Chefs, Demolitionist, Disciple, all that sort of stuff, like, and the 2/1s and so on. Sure, it trades down with like some of the 2 and 3 drops, which is unfortunate, but it's not a big deal, and it's better than just, yeah, being hit by them. And especially the 3/2s, you can usually Mystic Shot and stuff, or trade with Shadow Assassin. So on defense, where you can choose what to block, you can usually avoid the like worst trades. Just means sometimes you don't have a good attack because you get a bad trade, but that's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of 3, simply because of all the stuff, especially if you run Get Excited, and also feel like you want enough board presence. That leaves us with the cards that are in the deck that are not universal, and the cards that aren't in the deck. So first off, we have 2 Get Excited, arguably the 3rd Chump Wump, 2 Deep Meditations, and 2 Yone. So first off, when we talked about the first list and put this list together from what Sasha was running at the time, he told me he was a pretty big fan of Get Excited. He started with 1 and went up to 2, and that's why I started playing with 2. And so far I've been pretty happy. I'm almost certain that at least 1 is right, and probably 2. It just comes up a fair share that you only get there thanks to Get Excited to kill them before they kill you. Then Get Excited is a pretty decent removal that always costs 3. The discard cost can hurt, but you sometimes have cards that don't really do much in the matchup, or you have Chump Wump Mushroom Clouds, or you can just discard it to Get Excited, or you don't need it and you have it in your hand till later when it wins you the game. It also makes it a lot easier to win without Ezreal, because sometimes you just get the games where you can go Karma and just burn them out with Get Excited and Mystic Shot in like long drawn out games where they kill all your Ezreals. It doesn't happen that often, but it has happened to me. Like I had one game specifically where I lost all 3 Ezreals and ended up winning with like 2 cards in the deck, just burning the opponent out by like deep meditationing into my last Get Excited and finishing him off with Karma and a Mystic Shot and Get Excited. The alternative in a way is Gotcha. Problem with Gotcha is the deck has a lot of 4-cost spells and Gotcha doesn't go face. And I think a big part of Get Excited is that it can go to the face, so that you don't have too much removal that just targets units and doesn't do anything else. We already have a lot of those cards. So that's one of the downsides. And the other one is that Gotcha most of the time costs 4, which is a bad deal for dealing 3, even if you don't have to discard damage. Makes it a lot harder to double spell in a deck that already has a ton of 4s. And yeah, they're not going face part. So I really don't think like Gotcha is an improvement over Get Excited on average. I'm not like 100% on the second Get Excited, but probably like 80 or 90%. And keep going back and forth and considering if there's something else I actively need or want, then I could see trying without the second Get Excited. But I've also like briefly talked to Tilted22, and he's also really high on the second Get Excited and thinks it's pretty necessary from his past experience with the deck. And I'm not too surprised, and I can totally see that being true, that it's just a necessity and should run it. And it's really like weird to me that a lot of people don't, because the card is like super flexible. Like the only real problem with the card is when you have to discard a card you don't want to discard and you don't have like a mushroom cloud to fuel it. Otherwise, 3 mana deals 3 damage anywhere is just a really great deal. And especially in a deck like this that also plans to like burn the opponent out. So yeah, big fan. Don't know where they all went. Most people don't run him anymore. Seems very questionable to me. Card was pretty great in the 60 plus games I've played so far. The third Jump Bomb I already explained, especially with Get Excited you want it even more, but Jump Bomb is also pretty good. Like it trades with Basilisk Rider, which is a pretty big deal and something that can otherwise be really annoying because you can't always beam it, and also you might need your beam for like their Darius, or simply had to beam something earlier, or I mean they have 3 riders, so having more than 3 answers is pretty good because, you know, answers are worse than threats, so you need more answers to reliably answer the threats every time they have it, because of like the mismatch problem. That brings me to Deep Meditation. We started with 3 Deep Meditation and 2 Static Shock. I've seen a fair share of people run 0 Deep Meditation, which is kind of weird to me. The card is still quite strong. The deck really appreciates extra like card draw, especially spell card draw, because it fuels your spell synergies for Eye of the Dragon, and it also means you mostly draw cards that help level Ezreal, which is really important and the deck can sometimes struggle with. And especially in the mirror or in other grindier matchups, having those extra Deep Meditations is pretty great. But yeah, they can be a bit dirtily and a bit clunky, and sometimes the deck has more resources than it needs. So I ultimately decided to cut one for a 3rd Static Shock to help with board control and Ezreal and velocity a bit more, while dirtling a bit less at the same time. And I've been pretty happy with it, and I think it's probably the right direction. There are some people that run 3, and there are actually like a lot of people that run 0, which is really weird to me. And that brings me to the last card that a lot of people don't have, or even don't like, for whatever reason. When I picked up the deck, I was like, why is nobody running Yone anymore? I don't see any reason to not run it anymore. It used to be a staple in the deck. It was one of the cards that I was usually most scared of with proactive decks that I play a lot, because a lot of the time it's like, they don't have Yone, I easily win. If they have Yone, I'm done. And yeah, sure it costs 7, sure they can open attack, but the deck basically has no punishment for developing without Yone, so they can just almost always develop because the worst you can do usually is match what they are developing, so you can't get ahead if they develop and punish them. So you usually can just develop everything and then attack. So they get punished every time they have a weak hand. Yone punishes that. So if they aggressively develop, you Yone them. If they don't aggressively develop, they have to open attack for less, which is also good for us a lot of the time. Also, more beefy, proactive unit decks like the Ash deck, for example, can get really rough without Yone. They have a lot of big units, they have 1-cost Yetis that can really make them snowball out of control, and Yone kind of reins that back in. Can also be a great additional answer to Herring when you don't have a deny. Then Yone sometimes can be enough to sort of stifle a Herring to a point where it doesn't win them the game, and then you can take over. It also helps level Ezreal, which, like I said, can sometimes otherwise take its time and be a bit rough. In worst case, it's usually like you just drop it on your turn, stun their blockers, and hit them for a bunch, since damage matters quite a lot in this deck, so the card still does enough. And if you happen to be in a case where neither of that matters, you have Get Excited and Rummages to use it with. So hardly ever is bad. Like, the first one is absolutely insane, and I think I want the second one because sometimes 2 is even good, and you really want the first one in the mid game, and going down to 1 makes that too unreliable, I think, and something like the Ash matchup, which is really popular, will get weaker. The Nox matchup will probably get a bit weaker, and the Scout matchup, all the unit matchups basically. So while I'm also not 100% on the second, like 80 or 90% like with the Get Excited, I am pretty close to confident, and Sasha told me he felt like the second might be a bit too clunky. He loved the first one but was not 100% sold on the second one, but every time he cut it he went back to it because he just wanted it too much and wanted it to have it reliably enough to turn those games around. And if you watched my stream the last week, you probably saw that there were a bunch of games that Yone just turned around that otherwise would have been lost. And it's not like we lost games because we had Yone. So yeah, pretty big fan of Yone. Don't see any reason why it's suddenly not good enough anymore. Arguably, in a way, it's better than it has been at other times. Thanks to Ash being so popular and Nox Herring. So can only recommend playing Yone. I keep hearing from like Ezreal Karma players how they lose to these Ash decks. It's like, yeah, just put Yone in your deck, then you don't. Or like a lot less, like to a point where you're a notable favorite. Well, without Yone, it might be like a close matchup where you can get overwhelmed a bunch and maybe even slightly unfavorable. Alright, let's talk about a few cards that are not in the deck. Health Potion. I think running 2 Health Potion is really bad. The card is super low impact, and every time you draw both, you're like in a really bad spot, and even drawing 1 early is often pretty bad. But 1 could be interesting. It's cheap, it's burst, it's kind of hard to play around, and with the 1 it's kind of, if it's really bad, you have Get Excited and Rummage, you can kind of get rid of it. But I would definitely advise against playing 2. And I'm currently considering trying like 1 Health Potion over the second Get Excited, just to see how the difference feels and if that's a like slightly smoother and more flexible configuration. But it's pretty marginal, and it's not like I actively wanted 1. I just can see the appeal of it, but it wasn't like I actively felt like I needed. Yeah, third Rummage I already talked about. Key Guardian doesn't make sense without Claw of the Dragon. If you run, I think, 3 Claw of the Dragon, I think 1 Key Guardian is a nice addition. If you run 2, not sure. If you run none, it's terrible. The problem is the deck doesn't have that many units, so you will have it in your hand a fair share without a unit, and it's also just a 2-cost do nothing that replaces itself, and the barrier doesn't even do that much other than on the claws itself. Speaking of claws, I think that's the kind of card you should only put in your deck if you actively need it to be there, because a 2-cost 3/2 in a deck like this is not a good card. Sure, even if it costs 0, which usually only comes up turn 3 or turn 4, and sometimes not even burst speed before combat begins, so you can't even block, is really underwhelming. And if you can cut such a vanilla, like low impact card from a deck like this, it will make your deck more powerful and more reliable, and give you better top decks. And I was never like sold on this in the first place, so I started trying the deck without, and I can't say I feel at all that you need it. I can see the point of what Swim and his team did for the tournament. If you heavily play against aggro, I can see Claws of the Dragon being more appealing than Shadow Assassin if you don't care about grinding too much. But in a normal, like well-rounded meta game, like on ladder, I don't think Claws of the Dragon is a good card. And if you want the 2-cost 3/2 in a fair share of situations, I can imagine Kempunk being better, because at least he has the high roll potential of kind of running away with the game sometimes. But not a fan of both. I'd rather have cards that are good in as many spots, have as many synergies as possible, and are flexible. And stay away from like cards like Health Potion and Claws of the Dragon that are low impact and situational if the deck doesn't need them. And like I said, I don't think it needs them. I didn't feel like it did. What I've also seen is people run a retreat, which seems super bad to me. The deck has very few units. It's super marginal, super situational, and the deck really can't afford to play these like weak cards that sit in your hand half the time. Like, this is even worse than Health Potion, and also it's clunkier, and yeah. I mean, sure, people like it because of Eye of the Dragon and rebuying Shadow Assassin or protecting your Karma or Ezreal, but seems pretty loose to me given how valuable deck space is. Already talked about Gotcha. I think that really covers all the remotely considerable options. Yeah, I think that's really it. Yeah, this is the list with all the breakdowns. Hope you guys learned something from this and understand the list well. And now there's only one thing to do. Take it to the top 25 of Master, battle it out. My current record, I think, is 48-18, so pretty great win rate. And yeah, let's just jam some games, show you how to pilot it and how to mulligan it and so on, and show you some cool games. I might upload some more game highlights from last week. Later, after the deck tech, there were a couple of really cool, like super tight clutch games that turned into impressive victories that might be worth sharing and highlighting. Alright, you know the drill. Before we get into the games, please subscribe down below, turn on notification icon, hit the like button, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and turn off your ad block to help support your favorite content creators. I'll see you in a moment with the games. Stay tuned.